It's Sunday, January 19th, 2025. Welcome to Nation Watch. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are joining us, and we trust that even if we go overtime today, given the intense conversation we anticipate on a very important subject, particularly at this time in the life of our country, please bear with us. Before we get into our program proper, however, I'd like to bring to your attention something that happened on the West Demerara Public Road this morning in the village of Hague. There was a massive traffic jam, difficult to get to Georgetown this morning from Anna Katrina, Cornelia, Ida, Hague. And then it was discovered that the cause was what you're seeing on your screen. This was a car that was parked along the shoulder of the road. This car was hit by a speeding truck laden with sand. The report I received is that the truck first hit another truck, then veered into another car, which was damaged at the rear end, and then pinned this car against these two other parked trucks. This is the extent of the damage. Thankfully, there was no occupant in this vehicle at the time. But this is what the mangled remains of that once very attractive motor car looked like. Ladies and gentlemen, slow down if you are driving. If you are a passenger in the public transport vehicle and it is speeding, insist that the driver slows down. If your call for reduction of speed goes unheeded, contact the police. Speeding is the #1 cause of accidents in our country. We need to preserve our lives, preserve property. We need an orderly society. And what we have now is far from that. And this is but an example of the destruction that is brought upon us by our own, sometimes, omissions and acts of carelessness. I understand that one person has been injured and is hospitalized. We don't know the extent of the injuries, but please, whatever you do, be safe on our roadways. I'd like to welcome former Minister of Finance and Guyana's first Director of Budget and longest serving Director of Budget as well, to Nation Watch, no stranger to Nation Watch, and a person whose views are widely anticipated, widely respected, and often referred to. Mr. Winston Jordan, welcome to Nation Watch, and thank you for taking time out to join us.
Thank you, Mervyn. It's good to be here. Let me take the opportunity of wishing all our citizens, and in particular those who take leave of their Sunday to watch this program, and even more especially those who are actually on the program today, Happy New Year, belatedly, and hope that they've already, through their hard work and efforts, be seeing the fruits of their endeavors.
All right, so here we are, and we're going to discuss Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh's Exit Act. Exit Act. Budget 2025, the PPP's farewell budget, a disaster to our country. Mr. Jordan, you have elsewhere described this budget as a hodgepodge set of measures, or non-measures, as the case might be. Tell us very quickly, why the classification?
Thank you, Mervyn. Before we even get to there, permit me to give a general chapeau of the budget. You know, in a program, I think last week, I said that happily for the PNCR and in general the coalition, is that we have more believers than betrayers. I didn't say that out of jest. I said a sheer belief that that is so. And we have a lot of prayer warriors in the coalition.
Oh, of course.
And they had prayed and they had prayed. And when just about everybody was giving up, the good Lord answered their prayers, because the PPP has gifted the coalition something that they were looking for, and they're finally being gifted in the form of a disaster of a 2025 budget. Indeed, it must be a farewell budget. They must have seen the writing on the wall, because this disaster, even by the PPP standards, must be ringing in the ears of those who hold the reins of that party. As of today, I don't recall their greatest of cheerleaders, the private sector. I don't recall them coming out even with an initial statement. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. But I've been reading papers, listening to news, and I don't see that immediate reaction that they run out with praising the government for whatever they have done. So even their long associated comrades and fellows, the Private Sector Commission, is very coy and very cautious. It appears that nobody wants to come up. This budget is a disaster. And its disaster is magnified because this is an election year. And in this election year, one would have expected that you don't have to hear about biggest budget, because I said elsewhere, and as a former budget director and a former Minister of Finance, unless there is an earthquake or a similar disaster, every year, just adjusting for inflation, your budget
will grow.
Yeah. You don't have to crow about the biggest budget. That is an understanding in budgeting. Even in zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting doesn't mean that last year's total must equal this total. But it It means in its broadest sense that adjusting only for inflation, if you were to adjust for inflation, the two budgets will more or less be equal. So you don't have to crow about biggest budget ever. And you would expect in an election year that a budget that is carving out unheard of resources in the annals of this country would have A, put out a compass of where you started and where you are on that path to what you claim that we would have reached by the end of 2025. But that is the problem. There was no direction from the beginning because the budget is not grounded in any medium to long-term plan. So at no time were we, the citizens of this country, told or seen any document, because you know this government don't produce any documents, and even when a document might be produced, they don't put it out there. They're afraid of criticism. They're afraid of criticism. So the budget is not grounded in any national development plan or national or medium to long-term national development plan. So there's no pathway to publish telling me that how you are implementing election manifesto promises. A manifesto is not a development plan. It's a statement of intent. Mm-hmm. It's a statement of intent. But when you get into the government and you understand, you do your audit, and you understand what are the resources available to you and all these kinds of things, it gives you that idea as to how you can now shape your vision, mm-hmm. given what you have and what you expect. Instead, I estimate over or close to 3 hours was taken up abusing the PNC, abusing the APNU, abusing the coalition. Can you imagine you are controlling the greatest resources this country has ever known in a single year, or can put together in a single year, and you are devoting your time, the bulk of your time, to abusing your nemesis?
Well, it appears as though, the short man syndrome was at work. I mean, the fellow can't abuse the people he wants to abuse in Freedom House, so he comes into the parliament and abuses others who are not capable of responding immediately, but people will respond, I'm sure.
But when you look, and I have been exposed to a wide number of budgets from various countries and so on, you'll get the usual little barb here and there.
Yeah.
But the reading of a budget speech virtually goes uninterrupted and speaks to the vision of the government, the implementation of the programs, projects, policies, and so on, so as to achieve that vision. The barbs and so on, or the extended barbs, are used for the debate.
Yeah.
Okay? When you try to win your opponent, both on style, content, and who could outdo the barb. But I have seen all these different budget speeches, and never does a Minister of Finance use that critical time, or most of it, just abuse other people. And the unfortunate thing is that if we had the time on this and other programs, we can debunk every single thing that he said, or to put everything in the context within which they don't want it to be. And that larger context is oil versus non-oil.
Let's start. This abuse, it struck me. I mean, I can't listen to 5 hours of Ashley Singh. Intermittently, I switched in, and from the time I'm confronted the abuse, I shut down and said, I can read this, right? I can choose what I want to read and what not to read. And I recognize that this is the usual PPP distraction, the smoke screen, the wool over the eyes, to cause people to focus on the fancy views out, while being distracted from the real issues. You mentioned inflation. You mentioned adjusting for inflation and budget size. On Nation Watch, some time ago, we had this discussion where you offered the view that food inflation by itself was somewhere in the middle to high double digits. And here is Dr. Singh saying on page 16 of 111 pages of, I don't know what. He says that a 12-month inflation rate at the end of 2024 is estimated at 2.9%. He goes on to say that it was driven primarily by food prices, which rose by 5.6%. Now, what is your take on the rate of inflation? Is this close to accurate? Does it appear to be doctored? What?
Well, put it this way, that business of the rate of inflation has been coming under stress ever since this government has returned to power. You'll note carefully that prior to the government ascension to power, that it was taken whatever the figures that were produced by the Bureau of Statistics, right? They may, from time to time, have been concerns, and our good friend Lennox Benjamin, who was long-serving thing, he would have gone out there. He wrote letters, long letters to the press explaining, and he availed himself to explaining how it is put together and so on. Now, I am not going to cast any blame or aspersions or anything on the staff of the Bureau. For the most part, I know them to be a highly competent set of people. But having said that, and having had the experience of working with the PPP from 1995 onwards to 2007, there about when I left, I know all kinds of shenanigans can happen. And as I said before on one of these programs or so, at one time, even information connected to the weather was removed from the weather office and placed under the office of the president. In other words, then, you couldn't call the meteorologist, the chief meteorological officer, and say, what is going to be the weather tomorrow? You get the thing that, boy, you're going to have to call luncheon. That is how bad it was. And I'm not gaffing here. That is how bad it was. Okay? So I would not be surprised if the computation of the inflation rate has been taken out of the purview of the Bureau of Statistics and be placed elsewhere. Because it's not only here that you hear concern about 2.9. In fact, even while driving in here this morning, a few minutes ago, I read a post where someone said the budget claims that the inflation rate was 2.9 last year. But why does it feel more like 15%?
Wow.
Right? I have that post. Why does it feel more like 15%? And while some people may be confusing cost of living and price increases with change in prices and indices of prices, the long and short for the average person in the man in the street and so on, he don't want to hear all these fancy things about indices and prices and so on. What he is facing, right, food on the table, and what he is facing is a brutal set of price increases day in and day out. And he does not have the income, disposable or otherwise, to meet the basic minimum as pronounced by any number of international organizations that he has to meet. In fact, as you struck on that, perhaps I can just introduce for you one set of social statistics that are embedded in that same body speech that is considerably alarming, that shows the problems of food insecurity in Guyana. Right? It's there on the page that marks socioeconomic indicators. It's the first appendix. It's the first appendix in the budget speech. And if you go closer towards the bottom, there's a heading that is called nutritional status of children under 5. You see there?
Yeah.
Nutritional status of children
That's
under 5.
Article 510.
Severely malnourished in 2020. In 2020, severely malnourished children was 0.1. 0.1. By 2024, when you got all this money, between 2020 and 2025, adding in the latest budget,
It's 0.5%.
the government would have spent $4.609 billion. And between that period, the severely malnourished children under 5 has deteriorated from 0.1 to 0.5 in 2024. 0.1 when we had resources and when COVID was kicking dust, to 0.5.
Even the moderate malnourished.
Yes, I'm coming to that. Moderately malnourished children have has almost tripled from 0.5 in 2020 to 1.4 in 2024. And overweight children as a percent has gone from 0.1% to 1.5% and reached as high as 2% in 2023.
Yeah.
Children under 5.
2022 is 3%.
That's correct.
It's higher. Yeah.
Those are stark statistics that perhaps certain countries in Africa, because of their wars and the corruption and so on, and their inability to manage resources and so forth, these statistics might be associated with. But you're talking here about Guyana,
the richest country in this part of the world.
the fastest growing country in the world.
This leads me, Mr. Jordan, to the exact question that I had in mind. The question of cost of living measures. How impactful would these measures be, the measures contained in Budget 2025, to resolve the issues of poverty, which is somewhere in the region of 48% nationally, and the same kind of data that you just pointed to in their document? When Ashley Singh says that they had allocated $5 billion in 2022 and 2023, government allocated $5 billion respectively to address cost of living concerns, and we don't know where the money went. We do not know where that money has gone. And then he says that the allocation is increased to $7 billion in 2024. Again, we don't know where it was spent. And now they're committing to further $9 billion for 2025. Where's that menu of interventions? Can it solve the problems of poverty and malnourished children?
Well, the first thing is, let us make a general statement. Short-term interventions are for short-term problems. Temporary interventions are for problems that you perceive to be temporary as a result of some malformation, some structural defect or something that will quickly overcome itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue of poverty will not be solved by short-term interventions. The issue of poverty, and at 48%, because we didn't see any number
different
than 48%.
There is a number that's different. It's 53%.
It's 53. I saw the 53, but I'm being generous.
Yes.
I'm being generous. I'm giving the 48. Okay. 48% poverty cannot be solved by a one-off cash grant. 48% poverty cannot be solved by an increase in the threshold from $100,000 to $130,000.
Where it is consistent with the minimum wage of some.
Short-term poverty cannot be attacked by small increases in old age pension. So you see, all these short-term things, while recognizable, and perhaps while needed as temporary relief, poverty has to be solved ultimately by long-term policies, by structural reorientation of the economy, by the creation of permanent jobs of high income, by substantial and measurable improvement in areas of education, health, and so on, by equitable distribution of resources, income, and so forth. That's how you will attack poverty. You cannot attack poverty ultimately from a 5 billion cost of living allocation that nobody knows. There has never been, and the Auditor General, I will attack that place for any length of time. He has never audited the $5 billion to show us exactly how that $5 billion was spent. And it's an omnibus item. It's covering all kinds of things. Then it increased to $7 billion. Now here's the contradiction for this year. It is the government who is saying that inflation will decline from 2.9% to 2.8%. Mm-hmm. That is their figures.
Yep.
But they are then saying
that cost of
living and measures that they are adjusting for will rise from 7 billion to 9 billion.
Continue to be inadequate, in other words.
So there are all these contradictions in the budget, because that comes about because it is not structured. It's a hodgepodge. It's something, somebody says something, and you put it down there. Somebody call you, Ashley, listen, we want so, you put it in. But it doesn't weave. It's not the tailored Savile Row suit. It is one of those pieces of hodgepodge. I take a piece from you, like putting a quilt together. You take a piece here, you take a piece here. That is what is budget.
A coat of many colors.
Right. That is what is budget of 2025. And so we will end up doing the same thing as we were doing. Well, let's say they will end up doing the same thing as they were doing since 2020, which is biggest budget every year, the bulk of which targets infrastructure. That infrastructure being poorly executed, a lot of it is not derived from any particular plan, infrastructural plan. Because let us give some basic examples. Which plans show that you are going to get a permanent Berbice Bridge, for example? As you well know, that thing, somebody wake up one day and says, we're going to have a permanent bridge across the Berbice River. You know why? Because we haven't a permanent one across the Demerara River.
And a permanent one is supposed to be built across the Quarantine River as well.
Right, there you go again, right? And these kinds of things. They have never put out a transportation plan, as opposed to us, where these things would show. And I have this issue to bring up as I'm with it. I'm going to go back to that that thing, because it's a very important point that you raised when it came to the social aspect. Because in all of this infrastructure, which you know, who it's favoring,
we're going there,
and so on.
We're going there.
Okay. Well, let me just a general point I want to raise here, though, is, and I hope the opposition pay attention to it. Should the government be starting major new projects in the election year?
Well, this is a very, very important question in my mind, and I know that India has a practice, an established rule that you do not begin any large infrastructural projects or new projects, for that matter, in an election year. I'm wondering where Guyana is on that. I know that there's no rule But how do we get to a place where we have such
But
a
even
rule?
if there's no rule, there must be some argument in relation to the rule, or the matter must be brought to the public forum, maybe enough of pressure down the road. Because you can't have a scenario where, let me back up a little bit. When we came to power in May 2015, there were a number of loans, even though they weren't signed, they were committed. And we faced that task of either getting rid of these loans with the implications or going through with them. In other words, then you were forced to do things that A, wasn't a priority for you if it were there,
Yeah.
or B, it wasn't in your
Plan
at all. Right? Specialty hospital, for example. We came and met specialty hospital.
And we come back and meet Sheriff Hospital. Ladies and gentlemen, see this? See this? This is Budget 2025. This is the budget speech here. The theme of this budget is a secure, prosperous, and sustainable Guyana. And you've just heard from the expert that in this budget speech, there's nothing here that addresses the question of cost of living from a point of view of resolving that as an issue. We have heard of the contradiction, but I want now, Mr. Jordan, to go to another contradiction before we get to where you're heading there. In this budget speech, very early in this budget speech, there's a lot of boast after an abuse. There's a lot of boast about gas to energy project coming on stream this year. And we've been hearing for 4 years now about electricity costs being cut in half. We've heard that blackouts will end. We saw 2 ships coming in, bringing electricity, and blackouts still prevailing during the festive season. And with all of these large spendings on the question of energy supply, through the roof spending. I mean, the gas to energy project started off at 900,000.
600 million.
600 million.
Went to
Grew to
800.
9, then now it's past 2 billion.
Past 2 billion.
And here is the government as one of its top measures in budget 2025. Top measures. Removal of VAT from backup generators. Another contradiction. If you are going to Ashley, give me a break. If you're going to reduce the cost of electricity by half, and you're going to bring all unserved areas and have them on the grid, why do people still need backup generators? What's happening here?
Can you imagine? You didn't remove this VAT on backup generators in 2020, you are going to remove VAT from backup generators in the very year that you claim that the gas to shore will come on stream. In the very year that you said that now you have excess supply over demand, given the 2 ships, you now have excess supply over demand for electricity. And you are coming with this. It's comical. It's comical. It's not thought through. And in an election year, Ashley might have very well caused his superiors some growing pains for including that in the budget in the election year. And as a measure, it pales into insignificance, because by now, blackout has been so long with everybody that people have their backup. Whether it's, and generator is how can you talk about climate change and climate
low carbon
and all these kind of things and talking about generators, whether diesel or gasoline. People have gone beyond that. They have their solar, they have their inverters, they have all kinds of other things that they are using other than generators. And that we have had blackouts for so long that people, if they can afford it, they have a generator already. They have a generator already. So what is it?
It's a non-measure in my view. Actually.
It's a non-measure, and you can. I hope the opposition has a field day, because I see somewhere in this budget he mentioned, for example, how we stopped or we banned reconditioned cars or
Yeah.
cars 8 years old and so on. Now you going out there and talking about the environment. You are the one who get champion of the earth, champion of the dirt, and all kinds of story. And you are allowing in this country other people to dump their garbage into the country because there's no age limit. When they came in 2020, they removed the age limit.
But it's another contradiction. You're talking about low carbon development strategy, re-importing. You've gone back to importation of used tires. You've gone back to the importation of old semi-functional cars. But you were extracting oil at the same time,
Yes.
and you're talking about low carbon development.
And you're talking about low carbon.
It's a contradiction,
It's
isn't it?
huge contradiction. Huge. I mean, some things the guy, I'm sure they might be upset for him mentioning it because they'd rather it be not mentioned. Certainly when it comes to the environment and degradation of the environment. You see all over the place garbage. People are bringing cars that way back from 1990s and all this kind of thing. They come here as garbage. The Ghana Bureau Standard can't keep up.
With more than 10,000 cars being registered in under a year. I mean,
Every half year, 10,000 cars being empty.
I want to shift to this other vexed question. Ali told this country that his government has created more than 60,000 jobs. More than 60,000 jobs. Robeson Ben, for his part, has told this country that he has approved more than 31,000 work permits. Many Guyanese complain of not being able to find a job, and those who work are not receiving adequate compensation for their labor to keep their families comfortable. In this so-called job creation package that they're selling this nation, there's a very serious situation tied up in there. If you allege that if you have the proof too, you can produce it, that you will have created 60,000 jobs, and you're saying that you created, of those 60,000 jobs, more than half that number for foreigners. And that number of foreigners are largely citizens from known Commonwealth countries who are brought here, who've been issued with identification cards, and who will vote in elections 2025. Inside this budget, there are evil things being done. But that said, do you get a sense that there have been more than 60,000 jobs created in this country?
Well, first thing, let us deal with the figure. They always trot out figures at the aggregate level.
Yeah.
And when you ask for the breakdown, you get abuse or you get something that suggests we ain't giving you it.
Mm-hmm.
You know this infamous 200 taxes story.
Yeah.
When asked to detail these 200 taxes in the National Assembly, Ashley tells response was it's already in the public domain. But he doesn't detail this already in the public domain. So you're back to the 60,000 jobs.
Yeah.
Break it down, A, by sectors, B, by region, C, by male and female.
And by local and foreign.
And by local and foreign. Let us do the analysis after that. But you know what? They can't do it because including this 60,000 is temporary made-up jobs.
Yeah.
10-day workers. And they are increasing that number all the time. And again, I have a problem with the Auditor General's office.
Even the CSO program.
And the CSO programs and so on. But I coming back to the 10-day worker.
Yeah.
Because at least the CSO not taking up the cudgel, but they're supposedly identified to do something in the hinterland.
Yes, they're political activists.
But the 10-day workers have now turned out to be a big political scheme I've got people who complain bitterly. And they are doing not work that adds productive value. For many of them, they are forced to do party work. They are called out. If somebody's visiting, they're called out to be there. If they're cleaning up, they're called out with spade and so on to go on and clean up exercise, right? They go to the offices, particularly in the health sector, they ascribe menial tasks or no tasks. And many of them, unfortunately, and this is what we were concerned about, is that they're no longer looking for work. Many of them not even uplifting themselves. They are now hooked on the 10-day work. Because when you look at it, they are better off doing 10-day work than looking for a real job that they have to do work, real work.
It's almost free money.
That's right. And this now has created a dependency. Because you get this complaint which says, oh, they take out a day pay or a half day pay and so on. And you could see the forlornness in the person who's complaining because they expect it to get 40 or whatever the case may be, and they get this cut. It's created that dependency. And so this is the bulk of their creation of employment. These temporary 10-day workers that are not adding value to the productive base of the country.
And who are paid political activists, really.
Correct.
And who, if they do not carry out political instructions, then suffer the deductions and can complain to no one because it's not structured employment.
Exactly. And then the second aspect is they knock off people. They didn't say how many they knock off or how many people were displaced and brought in their own people and treating that as employment. In many cases, there were no advertising for the post, but you suddenly see somebody in the post. Many people have been sneaked into these ministries and departments, regions, and corporations and so on, semi-autonomous agencies. Many of them have been sneaked into there. Sneaked in. And so they have a surfeit of employees that really adding no value in one particular high-profile agency. I am told that they have stopped overtime and instead are going for extra employees. Can you believe this? They have stopped overtime and instead are going to go for extra employees.
And Ashley is talking about second jobs.
Well, I hope you come into all. I mean, there's so much. So much. But this is what. So, if they want to be taken seriously, do the breakdown.
Provide the stats.
Yeah. And let it stand. And let the evidence be your guide. What is wrong with that? What is wrong? But there's this absence of information. 2 persons called me within the last 2 days asking me if I have the numbers of people who are earning 130,000 and less. I said, brother, there's a limit to how much I know. I myself wish to know that information because it's important information for us to learn in the categories of income, how many people are in there. This is information that should be published comfortably. It's not a state secret, but we don't know. We don't know.
I want to shift to a social issue that I know is very dear to you. The National Insurance Scheme. The National Insurance Scheme is the only social organization in this country that touches the life of every single citizen of this country from birth to death and even after. It was discussed and cussed in its formative days.
Correct.
It was abused from 1992 to 2015. Abused not just by a certain section of the working population being schooled in how to exploit it to their benefit without just grounds, but it was abused by people in the government reaching into that like it's their own puzzling cup and taking out billions of dollars without leave of the owners of the money in that National Insurance Fund. The National Insurance Act provides, and the provision I recall to be very specific, in a case where the fund is unable to meet calls upon it, the National Assembly may advance. And those sums at an appropriate time must be repaid by the fund. Here comes Ashni Singh on page 98 with his measures, talking about putting, government will be injecting $10 billion into the scheme, which will offer eligible persons with contributions ranging from 500 to 749 a full and final grant, depending on the year of the last contribution was made. You, Mr. Jordan, ensured that measures were taken for the money removed unlawfully from NIS and put in the hands of CLICO was repaid to the National Insurance Fund. I don't know if the repayment process has been completed. What's the legal basis for this injection? And where's the plan? Where is the information that, where's the research, the study that informs what is required? Where's the compliance with the legislation in this regard?
Well, Maureen, I'm happy you brought it up because I've been having calls for people who, when you sent out that notice that I'll be on the program today, they were calling me and begging me to bring up the NIS matter. Yeah. And I said, absolutely. Because as you know, when we were speaking about poverty and so on, that NIS has to play a big part in a structured, comprehensive social security network, right? It has to play a key role along with such other measures as a permanent cash transfer that is legislated, right? And other programs to assist the disadvantaged, the disabled, women, children of certain age, and so on. And therefore, it was unfortunate the way NIS was treated under the PPP. And part of that treatment was their impaired investment in CLICO, for which the National Assembly had resolved and approved the money is being paid back to NIS, pending procedures that the government would have used to see if they get back the money from CLICO. And the PPP never, right? I think it was the Ramatar's government, they never implemented it. It took us, when we came in 2015, to take that resolution and turn it into reality. And I was able to put together 20 debentures of about $500 million or near there or something like that each, and to help shore up the base of the NIS. The NIS also has impaired investment in the Borbies Bridge. Yep. That is not
involuntary investment,
right?
may I add.
But they have been the beneficiaries of the oil sector and the industries associated with oil, and hopefully with some administrative improvements, including more visits to agencies and so on, and sterner approaches to collecting their monies. The last report says that their balance is now healthy, okay? Which now raises the issues.
Why now?
Right? Which now raises the issues that you put together. One is, why is the NIS not paying those persons who are above the minimum pension?
This is where I'm going.
Right?
With all this, this is where I'm going.
Who are not, you see, this is where you have a problem, huge problem. The last time the people were paid, and let me tell you, I have a vested interest because I'm an NIS pensioner. The last time such persons were
I
paid
didn't
an
know you
increase
qualified by age for that.
was 2019, when the coalition government, with its little resources, ensured 4% was paid to such pensioners and ensured that the minimum pension had moved to 35,000, which was the minimum wage at the time that we had moved it to. But, hold it, because there are a couple of things I want to say before we get there. But the government, the PPP government, failed to adhere to the regulations of the minimum, half the minimum wage.
Yes.
For the years 2021, 2022, 2023. And only after representations did they move it in 2024 to half the minimum wage for 2024, which I think was 41,000 or thereabout. But the pensioners are owed $92,000 plus for the years 2021, 2022, and 2023 that the government is refusing. Imagine the government is refusing to pay pensioners. Refusing to pay each of the pensioners who were denied $92,000 plus for those 3 years. And then you have this ridiculous situation where people who were above the minimum pension in 2019 now find themselves, many of them now find themselves subsumed in the minimum pension.
Precisely. That is the contention, the point of contention I want to bring to you. Over the years, well, the law prescribes that if you qualify for a pension at a rate lower than the minimum rate of pension, you are to be paid the minimum pension.
Right.
So there are persons who have qualified for and were receiving a higher rate of pension than the minimum.
Correct.
Because of the increases not going to such persons and only going to the minimum pension because of the same regulation you refer to, the minimum pensioners at one point in time will catch up with a certain band of persons who qualified for a higher rate of pension. It is unfair, it is unfortunate, and it is something that needs to be re-examined for the benefit and in the best interest of those who qualified for a higher rate of pension.
It's not only re-examined, a class action suit should be brought against the NIS and the government. I wrote a letter last year on this matter because a pensioner approached me. He was getting slightly over 52,000 in 2019. Slightly over $52,065, something like that he was getting.
Yeah.
At the time when the minimum pension was 35,000. As a result of not increasing the people above the minimum pension, right? Because he would have been roughly $17,000 plus ahead of the minimum pension.
Yes.
We have got no increase of 5+ years. The minimum wage for 2025 is about $108,000. That makes it $54,000 as half.
As minimum, right?
He is now forced into the minimum pension bracket.
Precisely. This is a large problem because a large group of persons who are being affected. And the government that claims to care clearly does not and has avoided putting measures in place. But there's a propagandistic 10 billion.
10 billion propagandistic, because this is people who have not qualified for pension under the rules for whatever reason.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. You know, I mean, if you got 500 something contributions,
those are grants.
You entitled to a grant,
Yeah,
or even if depending on circumstance. Yeah. Good. Okay. I $10 billion. Good. It means you have money. You cannot claim how it's the board of NIS who has to make this decision. I'll give you three points quick, and I raise this in my letter. You just referred to the NIS Act, which correctly you have taken. You were on the board of NIS at one time. There is also the COFO Act, the Cooperative Finance Administration Act, which is still enforced, because I checked to see if it was repealed. It has never been repealed.
It was not repealed. GuyStack has gone, but
GuyStack
COFA remains.
But COFA remains. Yeah. And NIS is the only remaining entity under COFA.
Yes.
And the COFA Act says that it is the government, the consult fund, that has to cover any deficit
precisely
of NIS and the other COFA institutions.
Yes.
They are flouting the law. They're using the argument that NIS is in deficit and therefore can't pay increases. It is irrelevant to the beneficiary that NIS is in deficit. Yeah. The beneficiary has nothing to do with NIS being in deficit.
Absolutely.
He or she has made their contributions in accordance with the law and expect those contributions to give them benefits in their old age. But they are refusing to replenish the NIS in accordance with the law and denying people benefits now for the last 5 years, going into 6 years. In which world will people take advantage of a people who have worked so long, contributed so much, and now in their old age, when they're expecting more illnesses and all these kinds of story, and when it's about the only source of income for many of them, that the government, this heartless government, is denying them their appropriate pension and their rightful pension.
Earned pensions.
Their earned pension.
Look,
okay? And I'm saying, and all the lawyers who might be listening to this program, help us to bring a class action suit against the government. Because the government cannot, let me tell you something. The government has favored this, don't use the word. The government has favored Gaisuku with 100 and another $13.7 billion this year or something like that. That will carry the transfers from the Treasury to Gaisuku between 2015 and the end of this year to about $120 billion. $120 billion. Gaisuku, a deficit-ridden corporation. A corporation that is supposed to be based on commercial terms, unlike the NIS.
Which is contributory.
Which is contributory. But the government is refusing to even supply NIS with an amount to boost the, even if you want to loan NIS the money and have them invest it and use the income after it and so on, so that they can pay. The benefits, let me tell you something. NIS is paying benefits that are peanuts in every respect. Peanuts. Death benefit, funeral benefit, widows. Those things are peanuts.
They are, and
they're not benefits that take account of the existing circumstances and costs for doing these things.
They do not.
They're peanuts, and you see it also at UG. I'm sorry to sidetrack. In UG, they're claiming this $13 billion investment they make to UG. I think it's $13 billion. They said is the allocation to UG. But you are merely giving UG a replacement for what they got during the student loan, a replacement for what they were going to get from the student loan, plus what you would normally give them, and it comes to 13 billion.
So you're not increase, you're not improved.
But UG was never at a stage where it got 50% of the resources required to run a university of a, not even a world-class standard, let us say a UV standard. It was never at that stage. UG suffers heavy deficits in terms of quality lecturers. They have improved, some have gone and do their PhD and so on. But many of the lecturers at UG are still part-time lecturers. In the law faculty, there are many part-time lecturers. There aren't too many professors in the law faculty. And they have people who graduated a couple of years ago and this kind of thing, who are actually teaching courses. And if you don't have full-time professors and so on, it means research is not getting done. or the rate of research that is being done is low, very low. And it goes to all the faculties. UG is not at the stage, but it is surviving. And you giving them 13 billion, it's only you suggesting for them to survive. And I have warned before in a letter to the press, I think last year also, that with free education, the demand, the immediate demand will shoot up dramatically. It will shoot up dramatically. UG will not be in a position to supply. Will not be in a position to supply. And with them now being forced to remove themselves from online back to campus, which is what a university should be doing. Campus teaching, not online teaching. Online teaching should be few and far between. But your campus, go back on the campus. That is why we have invested so much money in infrastructure. And when that happens, UG will need far more money that they claim that they're investing in. So I sidetrack, but it's just to give the analogy again that NIS, it requires NIS to be given an annual subvention. And let me bring it back to the coalition. We had said publicly we were going to give $5 billion annually to the NIS for them to rebuild their stocks.
Yes.
And to be in a position to pay quality benefits. Not these little things that they're trying. I'm not picking them out and so on. They're trying, but for the beneficiaries, they are trying in the other sense of the word trying.
But two issues came out there. You referred to Gaisuko, and I want to make the point that Gaisuko is the entity in this country that benefits the most from the National Insurance Benefit Scheme, particularly injury benefit, which is a benefit that is paid at a higher rate than other benefits. And Gaisuko, the employer, has been one of the most delinquent when it comes to making payment of people's contributions to the National Insurance Fund. I recall when the AP and UFC was in government, the Gaisuko's debt to the NIS was more than $1 billion.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. It took Winston Jordan's intervention to again cause resources to come to the disposal of the Guyana Sugar Corporation so that debt could be settled. The other thing that NIS does that is unlawful, clearly unlawful, is to say to people, we can't pay your sickness benefit because your employer pay the contributions. Your employer not paying your contributions has absolutely nothing to do with you an entitlement to benefit. As long as evidence shows that it has been deducted and there's no collusion with respect to withholding. And this is something that has been a form of abuse of the employees of this country. And it is not something that is done by NIS on its own. It's political instructions. And when it comes to these benefits alluded to by Ashley Singh here, with these grants to be paid and so on, these are as a result of political intervention.
Yes.
Ashley Singh and Bharat Jagdeo have gone out there on NIS outreaches. And they have issued instructions outside of the legislation.
Correct.
To the extent that I'm reliably informed that the mother of a senior government official who never paid a single contribution end up with $750 and getting a pension. You have people at the Guyana Rice Development Board who were denied pensions in the first place and whose friend is a friend of somebody and then got the pension, but people who work alongside them and for longer periods than they have were still told that they're not qualified. So the NIS is becoming a political football, and this gimmick of putting 10 billion is to suggest to the working class that we care about you when in fact these people are being exploited here, Mr. Jordan.
Yes, I have no question. And it came out of the blues that this quote unquote problem could have been attacked in advance of the ones that I'm raising.
Yes.
You understand? This is it's such has such legal implications that you could have the people not benefiting for 5.5, unconscionably 5.5 to 6 years. Their pension, in any case, has lost significant value. Because what the man could have bought with $52,000 in 2019, when the inflation was almost zero, how can he buy those same set of medicine when his health might have deteriorated over the last 5 years and so on, when admitted food prices have gone up significantly, housing prices, water, all these things has gone up. And you are unconscionably not increasing the thing and telling me about board and board and board.
So
board.
Clearly, no measures to mitigate the trials and tribulations faced daily by our senior citizens and pensioners. In the meantime, citizens of this country are being used as conduits of money from the treasury to friends, families, and favorites of the PPP. How is that possible? Simple. In a country where constitutionally healthcare is guaranteed as being free for all, this government is giving universal health vouchers. Mr. Jordan, it says here that they're going to give people $10,000 universal health vouchers and will be available to each person to help finance basic menu of health tests. And who's doing these health tests? Sheriff?
Mervyn, listen.
No.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But this is clearly $5 billion on a plate to the private medical institutions, passed by the government to the citizens as a benefit that they never enjoy, into the hands of the private medical sector. Just like that.
Mervyn, let me tell you why. This thing is so egregious. I mean, you can see through these things. You can see through look. They run out even in the budget speech and claim how they're getting 12 new hospitals. Plus maternity, women and children hospital, massive. Plus another one that's starting over at West Demerara, brand new.
Yes.
Another one at Saudi.
Yes.
Brand new. With all these state of the art. That's the new word. That is the new word. State of the art.
Yeah.
They refurbish and let them brand new hospital and let them. A brand new hospital somewhere in Cameroon or something under the World Bank program and so on.
There's a list of them in
there. So my friend, all these brand new hospitals with their state-of-the-art equipment, and you are introducing in 2025, an election year, another voucher, by the way, because that is another in a series of vouchers that this government has announced over the last 3 years that are tenable at private hospitals. And you just name the major beneficiary of these vouchers.
Yeah.
At the time when you were claiming that you are spending so much money to improve the healthcare system. So much money, right? Here's what another set of vital statistics. Here's what your money doing or not doing. Crude birth rate, same page.
Yeah.
Crude birth rate in 2020 per 1,000, it was 20. In 2024, it's 19.5. More or less the same number. But the crude death rate per 1,000 is 6.1 in 2020 and 7.6 in 2024, with a high 8.7 in 2023. In all this money that you've spent between 2020 and 2024, more babies are dying. More babies are dying. All the money that you've spent between 2020 and 2024, all your vouchers and so on, can't save these babies. And then there's another stats there, an interesting one. I didn't even realize this. Crude marriage rate per 1,000 was 4.4 in 2020. And in 2024, it's 4.6. People like they ain't getting married. They live in home or they can't afford to get married.
Can't afford it.
They can't. But you said this is the fastest growing economy. Maybe you need to give a voucher for married couples.
Which brings me to the interesting intervention of $100,000 for babies born, I believe, to Guyanese mothers. Inherently discriminatory, one, but two, it makes no sense because if you're going to incentivize population growth, it must be what you referred to earlier, a long-term plan to solve a long-term problem.
Correct.
So if you're paying $100,000 for every baby born in this year and this year only, and the cost of delivering a baby at a private institution could be anywhere between $500,000 and $800,000, you're simply helping with a small fraction of the cost of delivery. Even if it is done at a public hospital and it is a certain type of intervention is required, you got to find close to $500,000 to pay somebody to do the procedure in the public institution. The question is, after that, what? When you encourage people, hey, go and get baby and get 100,000, what happens after that?
Well, Mervyn, I think that has been the trial around on the Facebook. I just wanted to read, and come back to your thing. I just wanted to read a very interesting statistic that I think you should read out also. This is the number of nurses per 10,000. Same, I think.
Yeah. It's the same.
In 2020, it was 27.6. But in 2024, it's 21.8. We are losing our nurses while you building 12 new hospitals and specialty hospital for women and things and all these things. We are losing our nurses, and this is a remarkable statistic. Remarkable. No, Mervyn, I didn't realize it was 10,000, 100,000 only for this year. Is it for only this year, or is it a?
I didn't see any information to the contrary.
I would like to think that they meant something that would become permanent.
Well, it would only make sense. The title of this thing would only make sense if it does. If that was the case, but I don't know that it is.
But Mervyn, I was going to talk about it anyhow. So, in the context again, as the need for this comprehensive social safety net, right? As I said, we got too many temporary and short-term things trying to solve a long-term problem. All right, so we need to have a situation where they could bring the exports and set up this thing. You didn't want cash grants before. Then you come up in the election year or close to election year with a one-off cash grant, right? With a one-off cash grant. One of your measures says continuation of the cash grant, or did they put one-off into it? Is it continuation of the one-off cash grant, or is it continuation of the cash grant?
Let's see what that says. I saw something about continuation. Continuation of fuel. I don't find it readily.
But
there's continuation of the part-time job, which doesn't make sense.
What does this guy mean by continuation of cash grant? And then when you read the stuff, it says last year we went for 30.5 billion to pay 300,000 people, and this year we can continue it to pay the other 300,000 people. What is this guy? And this guy was patting himself on the back for a successful rollout of the program. But you didn't listen to all this?
There's no continuation here. Here's what he says on the national cash grant. He says this government has implemented a suite of measures to increase the disposable income of everyday hardworking Guyanese since assuming office in 2020. These include 25,000 per household COVID-19 relief cash grant in 2020. To further increase the disposable income of families, 100,000 cash grant for every citizen in Guyana age 18 and older will be further rolled out this year. and an additional 30 billion budgeted targeting coastal regions. He's still talking about the same thing. On completion of the program, a total of 60 billion would be placed directly. There's no continuation.
Yes, no, it's continuation.
Beyond this one.
But that's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah.
What did he mean by continuation? And when you read into it there,
There's
it's
no
merely finishing off a program
that should have finished before Christmas.
Before Christmas, right?
Last year.
And then he was patting himself on the back about successful rollout of this program.
You mean the same program that, look, do you know that they sent about 30,000 checks to the National Insurance for distribution? Do you know that there was no order in which the checks were listed or compiled? And that the NIS had to send back to the Ministry of Finance more than 20,000 checks undelivered because there was no system designed or outlined to be used in the distribution of these checks. More than 20,000 checks, Chief.
Do you know, from a accounting and financial standpoint, that all the checks that he has there are now bad, or he will have, they are bad
because the year has ended.
Because the year has ended.
Yeah.
So when he talks about another 30.5 billion in 2025, it means all those 210,000 people who weren't paid last year, what he's doing, he's going to be dismissing them. That is what is implicated, because he said there's 90,000 people who were paid last year.
Yeah.
And I understand how 90,000 out of 600,000 can be a success. As I said in some place else, even in Russia, 90,000 divided by 600,000 is fail. It's a fail rate. It's a fail rate. It doesn't even meet the threshold of 50%.
It doesn't even satisfy the number of people on the voters list. Which number more than 712,000?
So whatever you do, so here you have a badly rolled out, a badly designed, a badly everything. Because remember they stole my 100,000 anyhow. But we give them pay me. But the thing. So a badly designed, badly rolled out, badly executed, badly everything program that has more people troubled and rising with anger. And then you're telling them this year, we can continue with the other 300,000. One to them people, because you have to vote back their money.
But we got to be very careful here, because I tell you what, when the coalition got into government in 2015, and I'm speaking here about the CSO program, no money was budgeted to pay those workers.
Correct.
The program had come to an end.
Correct.
Now, a check was issued. That check was cancelled.
Yes.
And was returned. Now, so there was no money there to pay. But when they got into opposition, they stood and crowed from the roof that we shut down this
CSO program.
Whereas they're the ones who shut it down. Now, in this case, very subtly, Ashley Singh talks about the continuation of the cash grant.
Correct.
Because he knows they're going out of government, and he wants a bit of ammunition to attack the incoming government.
This is exactly what happened with the Because We Care grant.
Precisely.
This is what happened. They realized that because of the, wasn't a no confidence motion, it was what? Proroguing of parliament.
Yes.
And the unpopularity of the Ramattar government, that they were about to lose the election.
Yeah.
So they came up with this ruse. They're good at it. They're good at it. Play on the minds of the suffering masses.
Yeah.
And the easy way to play on them is shove a little dollars in front of the face. Yeah. And they came up with this Because We Care grant. And to make certain that you know who giving it to you, they had the people lining up in long lines in front of Western Union and so on to collect this money and cash it and so on. But when we got in there, the evidence was clear that it was a one-off stunt.
Yeah,
and they used the same thing as you said,
yeah,
to say that how we stopped the Because We Care grant.
So they know they're coming out of government, and they're setting the stage to say, you know what, if they don't do this thing immediately, we'll attack them and say they stopped it.
But now you got baby grant for 100,000.
Yes.
We don't know how they came up with this figure. Because like now they're stuck with 100,000.
Yeah.
We don't know what they came
You
up.
were the cause. you said 100,000 for citizens over 18.
We don't know how they came up with this 100,000. We don't know what is the intent of this 100,000, because you seem to have known, because you're talking about child delivery and so on. For me personally, I think they should train quite a few, what they used to call those people before, who used to deliver babies. Midwives. I think they could train quite a few of them in the villages and go back to that, because the crude birth rate either was equal to or even less than in terms of thing, and they know a thing or two about it. But what is this 100,000 thing? And it's an insult. It's an insult if you are going to suggest to me that I'm going to give you a one-off. Well, a baby, what are you going to do? The baby going to die after that? Who's going to take care of the baby after the one-off 100,000?
But the money done before the upper time comes.
That's right. I mean, listen, I was on a chat and people reminded on that chat about how it was under the Bonham government. And I could tell you, because my mom used to take me to the health center in Camerville. And there, the first one is the one in the health center that had in Lodge, or wasn't a health, not Lodge, that's working Ross or so. But we go to the one in Camerville. And there, back in the 60s, there you used to be given oats, cornmeal, milk, and so on at the health centers. Under the Bonham government, I don't know if you recall C-Rex.
Of course.
Right?
GPC made C-Rex.
GPC made C-Rex. And this used to be provided along with milk and so on to...
You could eat it like that.
That's right. Yeah. Mothers, children, and so forth. Again, as I said to you about this, and the person reminded me about the jingle that I had. The jingle, oopsie doopsie doops. C-Rex is breast.
Yeah.
After the breast. Right? Remember the jingle for that one and so on. So the point we are making here is these, because we care, CSO kind of thing, that is reappearing again in an election year to $100,000, which looks like a one-off baby grant. And if you lose the election, you can go there and hello.
We set it up for
long term.
Exactly.
Right? And so forth. Instead of designing a well-crafted, comprehensive social security safety net that will include a revamped NIS, paying quality benefits, a legally instituted cash transfer program that will incorporate the cash transfer, the Because We Care grant, and all these things. We put them under a legal arrangement, because We Care grant has no legal foundation. This one-off cash grant has no legal foundation. None of them.
In fact, the forced expenditure seemed to have been in violation.
The COVID cash grant had no legal foundation.
Yeah.
So we could step back and put all these things under a legal foundation, approval. And the all this baby grant and all these things can be incorporated. Just, I don't know how much more time we got. Just as the same way.
Enough time.
As the same way.
We are over time.
When you come to the issue about tax reform and so on, you know, these people just waking up and throwing a bit here and throwing a bit there, and hoping that it sticks. And you are absolutely so right. The budget was so tired that a number of their members start sleeping within 15 minutes of it being read. It's all over the place. It's viral all over the place.
Yep.
It was so dreary. It was so boring. It had nothing in it beyond infrastructure spending that has been ramped up even more. Notwithstanding poor execution, poor quality, and in face of the IMF's public investment, PIMO, the public investment management, the public investment management assessment, that identified as much as 41% of all capital expenditure being lost due to inefficiency. That includes corruption, ill design, no studies, poorly conceptualized, poor execution, and so on. 41% of the capital program will be lost due to this level of inefficiency.
You're going exactly down the path that I had planned for you. Let's look at this thing. In the month of November, we got information that the public infrastructure program was somewhere around 40% complete. Now, the public infrastructure vote was $666 billion, 40% complete. We have not received any different information by the end of the year. So we stick in with 40% complete. What, therefore, is the status of the 60% incomplete as far as A, contractual obligations are concerned, B, financial management, and this I'm talking about at the National Treasury level. What happens here? And beyond that, how do these projects arrive at state of completion in 2025 in terms of budgetary vote or the perhaps absence of money? Because if it's 40% complete and 41% lost, there's 81% of the money gone.
Yeah.
So you only got that small percentage of money left to do 60% of the work. Help me understand what's happening here.
Well, I mean, Mervyn, you have put it in perspective there, and there's nothing much more to understand. But when you look, for example, at the capital, the overall program, because they had 100 and including all the supplementary and so on, they had 1.27, I think, trillion dollars. And according to the note I made this morning, they are saying that they spent. Let me see what is their latest estimate for 2024. They're saying they spent 1.188 trillion. 1.188 trillion, which means that they have substantively and substantially
Utilize the money.
But how could this be? It means then that they have achieved almost 100% implementation of the capital program
across the country.
Now, if you said, because the difference, let's do a quick thing. The difference will be roughly, that will be 188 and 13 and 27. The difference is about 40 billion, right? The 1127 versus 1188, right? It's about 40 billion. Good. Now, of that 40, let us see if we could think it. 210, 21 billion would have been due to the non-implementation of the cash grant.
Mm-hmm.
So we account for 21 out of the 40.
Mm-hmm.
And, the 19 now is left back.
Yeah.
So it means that they are saying to us that they have almost completely implemented the capital program that was 40% implemented at mid-year.
Not mid-year, by end October, November.
In the October, November. How will this happen? Because maybe within the period October to December,
60% get done.
60% get done by calling in people. Because remember, you suddenly seen a raft of projects, people going with shovel and digging and saying how they start in school and they start in this and all these things. And people, instead of getting the regular 10 or 15% advance mobilization advance, some of them get 40, right? As you know, in the case of the man who got to build these towers, office towers, in 3 consecutive budget, they went for money and draw out all the money
And no towers.
And there are no towers. So where is the money if the man hasn't been given all the money? Because they cannot keep the money. But they are saying that the man has only been advanced, I think, 30% or 40%. So who is keeping the rest of the money that should have gone back to the consult fund because it wasn't being used? This is how they will assume, and because they draw down that money, it will show up as capital expenditure for the year. And this is what they have been doing.
And we now have to foot the bill for the completion of those projects in 2025 budget. I mean, so where is the money? Who's accounting for this? Where's the Auditor General in all this?
You are forgetting. See, it's important to remember that in, I think it was 2015, early 2015, before the election, they had disbursed huge chunks of money to a favored person in the pharmaceutical agency, a famous person. They had disbursed billions of dollars. That is one of several companies that a certain international agency made us know, and we clawed back. But that would have been treated as expenditure. And we know, for example, that a number of agencies have been given huge chunks of money that has been treated as expenditure, but have not made a delivery. Whether it be drugs or drones or whatever. But they have not made a delivery. But it will be treated as capital expenditure because you pay out the money. But you have not got the delivery of it. And so that's the only way you can jump from 40% in October to almost 100% by the end of December. And you're not talking here about $10 million versus 15 million. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars being suddenly disbursed in the short space of 2.5, let's put it as 3 months, under the capital program and maybe even other programs that they have, that this is being done.
And you can't use the appropriate word to discuss this matter in the parliament. Well, corruption.
Well, happily, I note that Tashiro has agreed that the words are archaic and they should be reviewed. Well, let us see if they're going to bring a motion.
The standing orders need to be reviewed.
Let us see if they're going to bring a motion to repeal and replace the words or whatever it is in the standing order. But I think she has gone publicly saying that she agrees in principle that, to ban words like corrupt and corruption is archaic.
There's another gate that you have to go through before you can actually determine whether that is possible. We've had experiences where the PPP seniors have spoken and the PPP owner has shut down. So I got you here, Chief. I know if I can get you back next Sunday. We at the hour 34. We are on overtime. We with Winston Jordan. This is the PPP's farewell budget. This is Ashley Singh's exit act that we're talking about here. Mr. Jordan, oil and gas. There was a massive views out about the illegitimacy of the Natural Resource Act. There was this thing about a robust system of management being implemented by this new PPP regime with the establishment of some board or the other. There was talk about the removal of the powers that were previously concentrated in the hands of the Minister of Finance. But there was no talk about that power being vested in the hands of the president, who appoints everyone and who has jurisdiction over them before they act, when they act, and after they act, including veto power. Where do you see all this abuse leading to as it relates to the actual management of the sector based on the provisions and contained in this budget. We know that Dr. Campbell is Campbell, that's the correct name?
Terence Campbell.
Dr. Terence Campbell has come out and he has spoken about the miniaturization of the functions of that body that was boasted about in this budget. Is there any measure of accountability? Is there any measure of transparency? How do we go forward with this natural resource fund? And by the way, comment please on the allegation that the act that the PPP inherited had no legitimacy.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Well, you know, we have dealt with this matter a couple of on the same Nation Watch, but it's good that because he mentioned it there. I know that particular Nation Watch struck at the heart, and they couldn't recover.
Yes,
because of the viral nature that it went.
Everybody came out.
Right, they couldn't recover, and so everybody came out and guns blazing. But those guns were like those cap guns that we used to use back in the days.
Even those backfired a bit, right?
You have to take hammer and pong it for it to spark.
Right.
Yeah. Look, when the as we well know, when the Natural Resource Fund Act was passed, right? As I said, the speaker was Barton Scotland. Dr. Barton Scotland, an eminent scholar in the law and everything else. And if Barton Scotland, who was the speaker, the most qualified speaker, to be quite honest, because I don't recall us having a speaker with a doctorate in law, ever, familiar with the laws, if he allowed the Parliament to continue the second or third day in January of 2019, he had to have studied the law. If he felt that the Parliament should not meet, he would make it known. But there's no law that says, in the Constitution or anywhere else in any law that says that with the passage of a confidence motion, because it's confidence is anything, that the Parliament shuts down. There's no law that I know of, and I ain't no lawyer. If Barton, who's the speaker, presided over that Parliament, in which the Natural Resource Fund was passed, it wasn't a bill that was introduced after the no confidence motion. It was a bill in the Parliament already. And unlike bills that are introduced and if not passed are die when the Parliament is dissolved, this Parliament was still in session. If they wanted to query that, they can go to the CCJ.
But they had an opportunity to, and they stayed away. But
they eventually went to the CCJ, and the CCJ ain't said, but Parliament got to shut down.
No, I mean stayed away from the debate on the bill.
Yes, they stayed away from the debate of the bill.
Yeah.
They stayed away. They had an opportunity to go. They stayed away from the debate of the bill while they were continue getting their monies from the Parliament office. Yeah. Even though they stayed away from there afterwards, they never turned up in Parliament, but they never gave back their monies for not turning up in Parliament. Because I think after that, the Parliament, after that passage that night, the Parliament only met, I think, one more time in May or June, something like that.
I think twice.
Yeah. I know it met to consider a supplementary, which they supported, but not in Parliament, because they supported because it had their monies to finance GCOM. They supported it. But they come in now to holler that it was illegal. This same 2019 act that it was eventually assented to by President Granger in January, around January 19th or 2024, something around there, but somewhere close around there, which they took over 75% of the act and put it into their 2021 Act. Over 75% of this illegal act, they put into their act.
But when this vote was taken on the bill, making it an act, was it not after the courts in Guyana had ruled that
the courts didn't rule yet. Remember,
rule yet.
It was January 2019.
Right. There was no court proceedings.
The 3rd or 4th of January, when the Parliament reconvened after the Christmas. The Parliament reconvened, that act was passed. Right? And not only that act, all the measures in connection of the 2019 budget were passed. Then, measures that they are still using, because the Procurement Regulations Act and all those things were passed in January of 2019, including blacklisting and so on, and they are using that same act. That same act they are using to blacklist and so on. That same act. So it's illegal for certain things, but it's legal for other things. But the same illegal act, they took 75% of its content and plunk it into their 2021 Act, and they got rid of the critical elements of accountability and transparency and so on, such as the Public Oversight Committee. They emasculated those for some rubric called board that is controlled by the Minister of Finance. Everything the board has to consult minister, or they have to receive instructions from the minister, and all this kind of story. But what people also are not remembering, or is not being reminded of, is that the Court of Appeal in this country, had ruled the no confidence motion invalid by a 2-1.
Yeah, that's true.
And as a result of the status quo ante being restored, the World Bank signed a loan. I was the signatory on March the 31st, I think it was, 2019. And that same loan they are using up to this day, the loan in the petroleum sector, $20 million US. That same loan, if it's illegal, why are you using the loan? Why didn't you give back the loan? You're saying that it's illegal. Why didn't you give back the loan? But it's not illegal for them to raid the Natural Resource Fund of the entire balance as at 31st of December 2021. $650+ million US. They wiped out the entire amount from the Natural Resource Fund that was carefully built up from the day Forest Oil came in 2019 December. And we had to endure all the time during the COVID, when we didn't have access to the money. Not much money at the time, maybe 60-something million at the time, but still under our careful watch. We had nurtured all that money. And they came 2021, right? Unheard of, 2021, by the night or the next morning, everything was signed into law and everything else, and the money was gone. Money was gone. So that, I tell you about the Cookie Monster.
Talk to us.
So that by last year now, they're not this nebulous formula that they put in, they weren't quite satisfied anymore. This is a formula they put in 2021 in their act. The people weren't quite satisfied. They said, man, no. Just in case we lose, we left in too much money for them guys. So they came back in 2024, just after the budget of 2024, and changed the whole thing, literally wiping out the monies in the Natural Resource Fund. 90-something% they take in. So of the 2.6 billion, let me see, let me get a quick figure, how much they're going to be earning this year. They are going to be earning Let me just get it here. I think it's 2.6 billion that they are going to be earning in the in revenues. Around 2.6 billion. They are going to be withdrawing 2.5 billion US. 2.5 billion US. They are going to be withdrawing in the budget year. It's a slush fund because they are refusing to identify what these monies are financing. They are refusing to identify that. And between 2022 and 2025, they would have, by the end of 2025, they would have withdrawn $1,177.2 billion from the Natural Resource Fund.
And that is courtesy of the amendment that they made to the legislation.
So that while they're talking about biggest budget ever and the familiar no new taxes, they are financing this biggest budget ever because of no new taxes by a combination of heavy withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund and massive borrowing.
Here's the question. You're going Mr. Jordan, I don't know, I'm probably a student here. We're going on the same path. The debt, the national debt, has moved to $6 billion. The national debt has moved to $6 billion. Is it prudent to expose a country like ours to such a large debt, which is, in my humble view, as an ordinary citizen of this country, borrowing against oil to be extracted, when the Minister of Finance, in his budget speech, projected a large reduction in the price of oil that is imminent? Is it prudent at all to borrow at this rate? I know borrowing is a necessity, but at this rate?
It can never, and no matter what they say about, it's the economy is expanding and it's allowing room for borrowing and so on. Listen, here's a fact. Oil is dominating Guyana's economy. In fact, let me.
I understand it's 90% of our revenue comes from oil.
Yes. I have it here. Yes. Okay. On the balance of payments, merchandise exports. In 2019, our merchandise export was $1,567,000,000 US, of which oil zero, because oil had not yet come in. Oil came in 2019, December, foresight, right? Nothing was exported. So zero. In 2024, our merchandise exports was $19,792,000,000, of which oil was $17,993,000,000, representing 91% of our merchandise exports. 91%. That is how oil has a chokehold on the economy. 91% in 2024. And all this money they're telling you they're spending on other crops and all this big fancy wording in this thing about bauxite did this and that. I'll come into that. In 2025 budget, these are the numbers. Exports are projected at $19,782,000,000 based on some dubious non-oil exports, like sugar gum increased by 115%, right? Coming to just now. So of which oil is $17,609,000,000 US, or 89%. So it's close, same thing, same percentage. The chokehold is there. The chokehold is there. Right? The chokehold is there. So when you admitted in the budget, as we admitted last year, as we disclosed, not admitted, we disclosed But the Oracle went on his press conference and said, what y'all talking about? Y'all only scaring people and so on. I'll prices ain't gonna go down next year. But in the budget speech,
plummeting prices.
They have admitted about plummeting prices. Probably even plummet even more now if the Gaza peace agreement holds and so on, and Trump comes in and he could do a deal there with Russia and get Ukraine back on track it might plummet even more. So, but without those events, they have budgeted for less price, and therefore less amount going into the
natural
resource fund. Exactly that we're saying that there are going to be rainy days, and how long those rainy days are going to be, we don't know. So if you now are spending out the money on dubious infrastructure, because that is what you're doing, you have put no infrastructure in place using this money that adds value to anything that you're doing since 2020. You don't have no value added in sugar. You don't have no value added in bauxite. You don't have no a refinery refining gold. You got one over in Suriname, I believe, but you have none here. You have no canning factory. You don't have any one of these things. And you're selling people dust in the desert by telling them how Bosai say how they're gonna set up aluminium plant. What if gas come to shore and so on? I mean, these are. Look, I'm telling you. I hope we have enough people listening to understand these facts. And let me say something too before you go there.
But hold on. You mentioned sugar. Mm-hmm. Ashley Singh admitting under the manufacturing sector in his budget speech, he suggested, and this is quite. I'd like to see this statistics that back this, that there's an estimated expansion of 13.5% in the manufacturing sector in 2024. That needs to be tested, but he admits that sugar manufacturing is estimated to have contracted by 21.8%. So the promise that you alluded to for the increase in revenue has been shut down by a 21.8% decline in production by the Guyana Sugar Corporation, which I understand resulted in an 18 billion loss to the corporation.
Yes, and rising because the audit figure might be higher than the 18 billion. And what people don't understand, they might put here 13 billion as the transfer to Gaisuku in 2025.
Yeah.
But every loss Gaisuku makes, the treasury going to have to make good of it. Because a loss means that they're owing some people for something and all this kind of story. Implied in that deficit is that they owe people, creditors are high and, debtors are high and so on. So the government of Guyana might be offsetting 13 billion of that 18. But they can come back during the year, which is unfortunate again, and ask for more.
Or tactically buy some land from Gaisuku so that money could be transferred again, and then boast about an explosive housing program.
And land again that is questionable because Gaisuku doesn't have an inventory of land. When you nationalized Bocas, nobody did an inventory of all these estates and what was the assets of these estates and so on. We found that to our chagrin when we took over the 4 estates and we employed Price Waterhouse to do the audit. They complained bitterly because many of the managers didn't know and they were uncooperative with Price Waterhouse in trying to get demarcations of what land, because if you're going to sell something, people have to get a transport, and the transport has to demarcate and so on. You have those problems. And one time, my Gaisuku claims the land, CHMP and Mayor City Council claims the land.
NISIL claims
the land, and Guyana Lands and Surveys claims the land. That is the kind of problems you also have. Okay? But it got to be a mental health problem that he mentioned in the budget to think that you could produce 47,000, a place named Gaisuku could produce 47,000 tons of sugar, and it's going to rise to 100 plus thousands of sugar by the next year. Gaisuco has not produced 100,000 tons of sugar since 2018, 7 years ago, when it was under better facilities and everything, and you had the 7 estates. When they produced 100
preferential prices.
102,000. No, we had preferential prices. 102,000 tons or thereabout. It produced around 2018.
Yeah.
But in 2019, now it produced 92,256 tons.
And in 2024.
And in 2024,
47,000 tons.
Less than half.
Yeah.
But this same place is going to produce 101,000 tons in 2025. The mental health problem, we got mad people you got who produce that budget. Mad people.
When in fact, Mr. Jordan, my investigation tells me that young canes, which would ordinarily be used for the first crop of 2025, were harvested and put in the last crop for 2024. So there is an insufficient inventory of cane in the ground to start the first crop of 2025.
But that's why I'm saying we have to have people with mental health problems who produce that budget. And in 2023, they said, the export said, Vera and all these, I read them, said that the production of sugar will be heavily compromised in 2024 because they used up canes that should have been in the 2024 crop in 2022 to boost the output of sugar to 60,000 tons. And I remember Winston Jordan, all them talking about what they were calling sugar. Some of it was slurry.
Yes.
In the language and so on.
Yes.
That they claim that they make 60,000 tons. Yes. Now you're down to 47. And now you think that you go more than double that in 2025. I'm telling you, it's mental health problems, right? Then you, of course, you have rice done well. I think they say rice is how much? They said 700 or is it 653?
I don't know if I recall.
Just look at the overview, very early. Overview of the economy. Just early, it's early.
I know you mentioned something.
Yeah, I think see if it's, I got a figure here that doesn't seem to gel with his 7. I think it's 7 something. Oh, very early. It marked overview of the economy.
Let's see where it's at. Introduction.
Next chapter after though. Next chapter after though.
You would know. You designed
right. That same one there now. I think.
Yeah.
That same one there, right? It marked overview of the economy there.
Nah, balance of payments.
No. Give me.
Manufacturing, electricity.
No. Okay. No. All right. So we close. They're right here. Right. So here you go. See, development in domestic economy, right? So it says here, right? Oh, I got year before, right? 725,282, 725,282 tons, right? That's good. Rice has always done well. It has always done well. 725,000 tons, and in 2019 we produced 682,000 tons.
But I'm receiving reports, Mr. Jordan, that in the face of this high level of production of rice in 2024, the European market has rejected 3 shipments of our rice.
Well, there you go again, and perhaps we run out of time to do with the whole Panama thing, but I will be talking about it on Thursday on my other thing program. Goal, they're struggling and they're talking. I'm telling you already, if it's not rain, it's sun. If it's not too much rain, it's too much sun. If it's not too much sun, it's labor moving all over the place. Yeah. But gold in 2019 produced 641,828 ounces. Gold last year was 434,067.
And still, at that significantly reduced level, contributed 4% of our revenues.
Exactly, right? And struggling, the 2025 target is 501,000. 2021 is 501,000 and still can't reach the 2019 figure. Still can't reach the 2019 figure. The only thing, before we go, the only thing that they have something to crow about is bauxite, right? Bauxite was 596,000 metric tons in 2019. It was 1.7 million last year. But we ran out of time, and because this bauxite thing, I have plenty to talk about bauxite that they don't want thing. But it will eventually come out. All the thing that Bosai and them doing, we should ask for the agreement that gave Bosai presence in Guyana and what it is that Bosai is contributing to the treasury. Just before we came out, Bosai finally made declaration of a dividend after many, many years, decided to give you a dividend. But ask them whether they're paying royalties on bauxite. Ask them to pay royalties on bauxite.
And we need to ask also for those new production sharing agreements that are being boasted about in this budget. The public needs to know
which production sharing agreement,
what those agreements say, if they in fact exist.
But by the way, before we end off, he sneaked into that budget the fact that there were 5 oil discoveries in 2024. Did you know about that?
Before the budget speech, no.
But that nobody has made a comment on it.
Before the budget speech, I had no idea.
I am telling you,
it
is in there.
Yes, I read it.
That there were 5 new discoveries of oil in 2024. Not one was made public. So we have problems. We have a lot of problems. A lot of problems.
Well, Mr. Jordan, thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We've been here for 2 hours. Mr. Jordan has gracefully and graciously stayed with us for 1 hour, sharing his depth of knowledge on these matters as we discuss budget 2025, the PPP's farewell budget, and Ashni Singh's exit act. Budget 2025, a bit of suffering for everyone. Until we meet again next Sunday, God bless.